Good morning, everyone. I'm Esther Manheimer, Mayor of the City of Asheville, and I'd like to welcome you to the March 21st, 2024 Agenda Briefing Work Session. All council members and staff are participating virtually. The live meeting will be streamed on the city's YouTube channel, accessed through the YouTube icon on the front page of the city's website or via the live stream. The live meeting will be available on Charter Spectrum Channel 193. You may also listen to the meeting via phone at 855-925-2801, meeting code 10181. And as with all agenda briefing work sessions, we will not take public comment. Council and staff, unmute yourselves and say a quick hello when I call your name. Vice Mayor Sandra Kilgore.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Antoinette Mosley.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Kim Roney.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Maggie Ullman.
Hey, everybody.
City Manager Deborah Campbell.
Good morning.
Assistant City Manager Rachel Wood.
Good morning.
Assistant City Manager Ben Woody.
Good morning.
And City Attorney Brad Branham.
Good morning.
City Clerk Maggie Burleson.
Good morning.
And Councilwoman Shanika Smith will not be able to join us due to a work conflict this morning. I will now turn it over to our City Manager, Deborah Campbell.
Just briefly, I want to say I am here today. This is Sage.
Oh, you weren't on my script. I'm sorry. I was just reading through the script. Councilwoman Sage Turner.
Yes, I'm here. Yes.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Deborah Campbell, serve as a city manager. As you all know, these agenda briefings are designed to accomplish a couple of things. One is we're going to have a deep dive on the upcoming City Council meeting agenda items, which this meeting is scheduled for March the 26th at 5 o'clock. That is in person in our City Hall. We'll be reviewing council committees. There's only one that's upcoming before our next council meeting. That will be Environment and Safety Committee, and that is scheduled for March the 26th at 11 a.m. We're going to review some upcoming agenda items and then briefly, and then we will have a little deeper dive on other issues and updates, and there are two of those items on the agenda. And as you know, we generally rotate between the assistant city managers in terms of the overview of the upcoming council agenda. But before we have Ben Woody, who will be reviewing the council agenda, I want to ask Taylor Floyd to join us in a meeting to discuss the upcoming budget work session, which starts at 2:30 also on March the 26th. So that is a long day for us because there are a number of items on the council agenda that we think will take up a lot of time and fruitful discussion, we hope, and action. But we also have a budget work session. Taylor, if you want to just give some highlights of what that work session will entail and some overviews, and then we'll turn it over to Ben to take the deep dive in the agenda. Taylor.
Sure. Thanks, Ms. Campbell. Good morning, everybody. Taylor Floyd, Budget Manager. Just kind of a quick overview of the plan for the work session. What we'll cover, one, in light of the heavy council agenda that Ms. Campbell mentioned, we'll provide some details about the fees and charges that we'll be presenting for approval at the regular meeting. So kind of try to answer some questions related to that. We'll have a summary of results from this year's budget survey that closed earlier at the end of February. We'll be providing you all with some more detailed information, some actual numbers on our general fund operating budget. Some of these things I know you all are aware of, but we've talked a little bit about our revenue and specifically slowing sales tax We'll give you some more specific examples of some of our increasing costs that we see, again, normally every year in operating and personnel. We'll talk a little bit about some transit needs, what compensation increases we might have the ability to fund, and then again, kind of summarizing as we mentioned to you all, talking kind of where we're at right now from a balancing perspective and the likely need for another significant fund balance appropriation in this year's budget. We'll also spend a little bit of time talking about capital and some more specific information, initial proposal on the 2024 GEO bond referenda and amounts for that. So a lot to cover in the work session as well as the council meeting. Happy to answer any questions, but otherwise I guess I'll hand it over to Ben.
Thank you, Taylor. Ben?
Yes, thank you, Taylor, and good morning, Mayor, members of council. I'm going to jump right into our regular meeting agenda. We have no proclamations scheduled for Tuesday. We actually have a relatively small consent agenda, and I'm going to cover a few items. And of course, if I miss anything you want to discuss, please just let me know, or please stop me if you have questions. I'm going to start with item B on the consent agenda. This is the city's annual resurfacing contract. Total contract amount is $2.9 million. And just so council can understand what that does, that will cover or resurface, approximately, or will resurface 13 city streets that totals about 5 miles of actually resurfacing work. Next, I'll cover items C and F together. So both those items are condemnations related to 2 projects. And item C is the condemnation of a portion of 1 remaining property, which will allow for the replacement and upsizing of a water line that's included in the Water Department's capital projects plan. Item F is also the condemnation of a portion of 1 remaining property related to the Hominy Creek Greenway project. And I just want to highlight these. Again, both these city infrastructure projects, we're down to 1 property for each. And staff has tried to negotiate with both property owners and have offered compensation based on appraised values, but were unable to reach agreement with these 2 property owners. So at this point, these condemnations are necessary to allow both of these infrastructure projects to continue moving forward. Councilman Maroney, I see you have a question on these items.
Yeah, on item F, it's my understanding that, obviously condemnation is not like the goal of what we want to have in these situations. And when we have neighbors who are wanting to benefit from and use public space as well, it'd be great if we could get everyone on the same page. But my understanding was that there was potentially an ask for this to go to a later council meeting because the person that's property is being condemned would like to attend and can't because of a family issue. What is the reason to put it on this agenda versus a later agenda?
Ben, if you don't mind, I think I may be able to respond to Councilmember Roney's request. Thank you for bringing that up, because I do know that the property owner has reached out on a few occasions to you and perhaps other members of council on this. So let me see if I can answer the first question not a question, but statement that you brought up, which is condemnation is absolutely not our goal in any of these cases. In fact, our goal is always to obtain the necessary easement rights voluntarily with the property owner. This particular one, item F, has actually been ongoing for about 3 years now. And I can say that staff, including myself, have put in substantial efforts to try to work with that property owner and reach with them. I've personally walked to their property with them. We've met with their attorneys. We've met with them personally. And we just feel at this point that we have not been able to reach a consensus. Now, it is really important to note that council's role in a condemnation is somewhat procedural. What you do is provide us authority to move the process forward. That does not necessarily mean that there is a change in what the property owner is going to be entitled to or what the city is seeking. It merely gives us an additional tool to continue to advance the process. What that means in procedure is that we will continue to work with the property owner. It'll essentially leave the park staff, or excuse me, transportation staff, who's been the primary negotiators, and transfer to my office, where we'll be able to immediately resolve things with them the next day, continue to negotiate. We usually ask council not to negotiate the actual terms at the dais. And I won't try to put words in the property owner's mouth, but I feel there may be a desire to talk about some of the liability issues around this, to talk about perhaps even the amount of compensation. All of those things are generally in the purview of staff or my office. And for that reason, I've suggested that I think it actually doesn't advance anything for either city staff or the property owner to delay the council process. I believe it actually allows us to bridge the process that we've already expended. I think the amount that we can actually gain from it, and proceeding to the next stage. If that ends up requiring us to file any legal documentation, it still guarantees the property owner the ability to get their compensation, to resolve it at any time they see fit, and does not force them into court anytime in the near future. But what it does do is it allows the city to ensure that we have the protected right of that greenway if there is a situation where they decided they ever wanted to cut off those access rights. So my recommendation, given council's limited procedural role in this, is to allow it to move forward. That will do absolutely nothing to cut off the communications that we're having with the property owners or the access that they have directly to me.
Yeah, I guess I appreciate that, Brad. Thank you. I guess for me, it's like, because it's not holding up the process that's already been in place for 3 years, it's just a procedural matter, even though it's hard. Moving it to the next agenda, I hear that you may think it's not the best strategy, but if it's the ask and it doesn't put us in a pinch, I would hate for the issue to be our process and not the issue, which sometimes is the case, and we are up against deadlines we can't avoid. So I would prefer that if we can hear the applicant or the property owner's request, that it may help to relieve some of the pressure. So that would be my suggestion.
I just want to chime in here. I'm sympathetic to that. I will say, sitting on the MSD board now for many, many years, they have condemnation down to a science, and you're always going to encounter folks that this is a real struggle for them. And I'm not sure delaying a meeting in my experience has actually helped the situation at all, because those folks are just sort of struggling with it regardless. And we as a city have so many projects that are contingent now on some condemnation. I mean, we heard last night about the Haw Creek sidewalk project, which has been funded, and we hear it's going out to bid this summer, and the community's frustration with how long that is taking. So to me, it's kind of a balancing act, but it also, I defer to legal, because this is really kind of in their wheelhouse, and we're sort of more of a kind of the logistical. We're engaged in it, but we're not supposed to be involved in the actual litigation or negotiation or anything like that. That's just my 2 cents. I mean, I really want to see the city kind of rock and roll on some of these projects. It comes up a lot more on these sidewalk projects, and it just seems like they take forever because this part of the process is super labor intensive. And we're lucky to have Brad, who has a strong background in condemnation, because that's one of the things he did in Charlotte. So that's sort of a new thing for Asheville, to have someone with that sort of background, knowing how to handle them.
I just want to make sure I understand, because I have talked with this family and I'm sympathetic, but I was encouraging them to somehow come to a conclusion with the city. So this come to this point because you all have not been able to agree on either the area, the access, or the amount of money, right? But you're not, that none of that's going to be stopped by this next step. You will still have the opportunity to negotiate such things. Not the area, but.
Yeah, Sage, I think that is an excellent characterization. The reality, as the mayor has pointed out, is that council's role in this really is just the next logistical step. Generally speaking, it is extraordinarily rare and really not at all advisable for council to get involved in negotiating the details of any, whether it's a grant of an easement or it's a settlement of a lawsuit. Those types of things in the condemnation world generally don't happen. What we ask council to do, because it is required by law, is just to give staff the ability to continue the process. This does nothing to negate the property owner's ability to continue to interact with staff and negotiate on any of the terms at all, as well as resolve it at any point they so choose. What this does is if we reach a point where we just simply cannot resolve it, it allows us to continue to protect the city's property rights needed to, in this case, protect the greenway by filing the necessary legal paperwork. But again, that still protects the property owner's right to get fully paid for that. Now, I would mention that there's one unique aspect to this. Generally speaking, we've only moderately talked about dollars. What the property owners, I think, have really been concerned about is the language in the actual easement document, whether or not there's certain protections for liability and those sorts of things. These are elements that council would not be involved in anyway, which is really the crux of my recommendation to allow us to move forward. Because I do think that we have reached the end of what we can actively and effectively negotiate with the property owners without being able to move this forward. However, having said that, it is always my goal in a condemnation case to try to work matters out with the property owner without filing any sort of a lawsuit. If we do have to file it, we continue to try to work with them so that they never have to go to court and they get all the money that they're owed as they're part of that process. This is just one that has been dragging on a long time. And oddly enough, the greenway is actually already complete. We discovered that there was a missing easement on this particular property owner's land. And because of that, this is not stopping us from building the project. This is putting at jeopardy our ability to keep the project open. There's already been some correspondence from the property owner's attorney suggesting that they might restrict access, which would cut off the Hominy Creek Greenway at any point. That's why we feel that there is some jeopardy here with prolonging this too much. But I will always defer to council on your timing preferences.
Okay, I may ask for this item to be pulled on Tuesdays. That shouldn't be a surprise. But I know we have a busy agenda for today. Thank you for answering my questions, Brad.
Certainly.
Okay, I'm going to keep moving. Finally, on consent, I just want to note that item G will be covered as part of the Mountain Housing Opportunities presentation that's under the other issues section of today's agenda. And so with that, does council have any questions on any other items on consent? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move to the presentations and reports section of your agenda. And I'm going to ask Rachel Wood to cover those items.
Thank you, Ben, and good morning again, Mayor and Council. I'll briefly go through the 3 items that we have slated for presentations. Item A is a presentation from the Carter Development Group on the key findings and recommendations from the recently completed Cease the Harm audit. You all should have received an email from me last Wednesday that includes the full 168-page audit report. Carter Development Group will have 10 minutes to cover the findings from that 168-page report. So their focus at Tuesday's council meeting will be primarily on the city findings. And then from there, staff will be working with the Community Reparations Commission, county staff, and the broader community on developing an implementation plan related to those recommendations. Item B is actually going to be covered under the other issues and updates section of today's agenda briefing. So I'm going to skip over that. And then I'll highlight item C. Item C, you're going to receive a presentation from Enterprise on the progress made to date for the affordable housing plan. This will include an overview of their approach and preliminary recommendations, including goals and strategy recommendations for the city to lead and or support related to affordable housing over the next 10 years. And if there are no questions on that, I'll turn it back over to Ben.
Okay, thank you, Rachel, for covering those. Moving on to the public hearings section of your agenda. We have 3 public hearings listed. However, I'll note that item A has requested a continuance. They are still working with the clerk's office to establish that specific date. But they will have that done by the end of the day today. So when the agenda comes out, the final agenda comes out, you will see this item with a specific continuance date. So moving on to item B, I am going to share my screen. Item B is an amendment to an existing conditional zoning that's in place for this 137 acre property. It's actually addressed off of Brevard Road, but it's typically called or known as the Ferry Road property. Buncombe County is the owner of this property, and Buncombe County is also the applicant for the conditional zoning amendment. And what this conditional zoning amendment request does is the county is proposing a new conceptual master plan for the development of this property. And you can see on the plan, they have really 5 phases, or they're labeled as districts that comprise this conceptual development master plan. Again, you can see the kind of distribution of a good mix of conservation areas and open space, as well as development areas. And here we go. And really, to get into a little bit of the details, and of course, planning staff will provide more of this at your presentation on Tuesday. But in the conceptual master plan, the county is proposing a total of between 550 and 935 dwelling units with commercial space up to 80,000 square feet. And of course, you can see, since this is just a master plan, they are establishing really ranges and maximums and minimums within these different districts. So again, there's some variability in the final development plan, but that's typically how master plans are laid out. Specifically of interest, this does have affordable housing proposed as part of the project. A minimum of 20% of the residential units, which is a mix of rental and for sale units, will be designated for those with incomes at or below 80% AMI. And 100% of the affordable units will accept housing choice vouchers, and that is the language that is taken from the conditions proposed by the county. The project does include a number of technical modifications, which is typical for conditional zonings. I'm not going to go through all of those, but again, staff will present those specific technical modifications on Tuesday. This project has went to our Planning and Zoning Commission for review. That body recommended unanimous approval with conditions. And then the TRC, Technical Review Committee, as well as planning staff, also recommend approval. Any questions on public hearing item B? Councilwoman Roney and then Mosley.
Antoinette, you go ahead.
I was just wondering, can you repeat that language for voucher acceptance? It's not the one that we've leaned into, but it's the one we have before.
Yes, the language is 100% of the affordable units will accept housing choice vouchers. Councilwoman Roney.
Yeah, I guess I was hoping that since this is an opportunity for us to partner with the county on multiple levels, that we might see something about my colleagues' leadership around voucher set-asides instead of just accepting. But my biggest question today is, can we speak a little bit to the updates around transportation since we've met with the county about this? I know for me, I'm really concerned that it's so close to transit options, but having a car shouldn't be a prerequisite to renting or owning a home here, especially when we have 2 major partners in the community working towards this affordable housing development.
And I'm happy to answer that, Ben, if you want me to. So the way the language has been revised is that the city of Asheville and Buncombe County will work in partnership to explore an extension of fixed route bus service to the project site. And staff is working and in communication with the county on a number of partnership opportunities, including the Ferry Road development. And so while no specific decisions have been made, those conversations are ongoing. And I think we're able to get at some point in the future to a workable solution to ensure transit is available to that location. We just don't know exactly what that solution will be at this time.
Thank you. And I know transit's part of it, but also that road, it has an incline to it. So we'll need some options for walkability, bikeability, making sure that, once again, if you don't have a car, doesn't mean you can't access it. Because I imagine because this is such a special new neighborhood and an exciting project, it's got the conservation easement and the walking path, that we'll have a lot of neighbors who live and work in Asheville who would like to have paid property taxes through the bonds for this to be for them. And they will access this location whether or not they have a car. So those are going to be some of my big concerns for Tuesday. And it should be unsurprising that, of course, I've, been really consistent with the county that partnership for transportation for this project, I would love to see some good faith efforts and partnership in transit in general, because we have so many needs. And we need to be able to build housing density on our transit corridors so people have access to jobs and groceries. So I know we have a lot to talk about today, but promising to partner years from now for one project is obviously, I think we could do better. And that's all I have to say for today.
Thank you, Councilman Roney. And just real quickly, in terms of walkability and pedestrian connectivity, I do want to quickly show a slide, and of course planning staff will present this on Tuesday as well, but they do have a slide, or part of the conceptual development does create kind of a framework of asphalt greenways, natural surface trails, paved multi-use path, boardwalks, things like that. And of course, the UDO does require sidewalk infrastructure, so the county or developer will be responsible for the installation of sidewalks as well. But that was a good question. And I just wanted to show this, that there is some intentionality in terms of creating walkability within the development as proposed.
Thank you for that. And I definitely am excited about the walkability within, but then how do you get to it? Because the entrance way is not fully addressed yet.
Got it. And we'll make sure that planning has that on their radar for Tuesday as a follow-up item.
Well, I mean, Ben, I would just say to Kim's point, I mean, I'm kind of wondering if it needs to be elevated from a planning level, maybe Deborah, some high-level conversation with Avril. This really brings up the larger question about what is our plan to work with the county on transit issues. So, I know there, as this came out of P&Z, there was sort of a kind of broad commitment to talk more about this. And I don't expect all this to get figured out by Tuesday night, but I do wonder if it's an opportunity to reopen that conversation with the county about looking at, a plan for the future for the city and county partnership around transit. I know we need to do our study that I think is going to be, there's going to be a request for the funding in the budget. We were trying to go halvesies with the county on that, and doesn't seem to have traction. So, if there is an opportunity on a staff level for there to be a conversation prior to Tuesday to see if we can get any more tightening of that language around looking at the transit issues before this project eventually comes online. Obviously there's time.
Sure.
So one thing, I'm just fascinated by this project, Council. When we heard the presentations from the county about it, they're leveraging a huge number of affordable housing units, lots of levels of affordability, with some with real deep levels of affordability. But I note that the subsidy required to make this happen is around $90,000 per affordable unit. And that doesn't include the land. So, that is, I raised that question at the State of the Downtown presentation. The county also presented, Brownie Newman presented their plans for affordable housing in downtown Asheville, which frankly look really interesting. Again, a large number of affordable units, much more than we were able to leverage at Matthews Ford, for example. A great deal more, but their per unit subsidy there is $49,000. It's also dependent on a 9% tax credit, which of course, can't count on for sure. I'm sure it'll be very competitive in that application. And I don't know that includes the land once again. So as we look at redesigning our affordable housing programs and looking at the use of our funds, we've previously had a cap of $30,000 per unit. I'm just struck by the high level of subsidy required to bring these large number of affordable housing units online. I do think it sort of poses the existential question of the role of local government in making these projects happen, right? I mean, because it's such an incredible amount of money relative to the size of our budget, to the size of the county's budget. It obviously is probably why the federal government historically has played the largest role in federally subsidized housing, because they've got the money to do it and they can really make deeply affordable housing happen. But those programs are, they're not building any more public housing, but, and there are vouchers, but there's, we know the problem is there. There's more vouchers than there is housing. So anyway, I think it's a lot for us to chew on as we look at future use of city-owned property for affordable housing, and as we redesign our affordable housing policies to face this kind of new normal and the cost of construction. I don't have any answers. I just think it's a really interesting discussion and a very difficult one. So anyway, yes.
So Mayor, thank you for those observations. And first, going back to transit, I want to assure council and the community that we have and will continue to have conversations with the county. And I think that they have been relatively productive. No, we haven't reached a final decision in terms of a definitive path forward, but we definitely are pursuing that. And Rachel Wood and Jessica Mars and Amber Weaver are the ones that are working. I hope I didn't go back to the former Amber. Wagner, okay. Are working diligently with the county in determining what our next steps will be. As it relates to affordable housing, I will be so excited about the recommendations from the Enterprise Foundation, because what we have been doing is continuous improvement. That is, we have done some things with the policies and programs that we have on our books today. And this particular kind of relook and reassessment of the city's resources and our tools that are in our toolkit are being reassessed. And I think we are at a good place, and hopefully the presentation that you'll get on Tuesday will be enlightening for us in terms of future directions, particularly as it relates to supporting the development of affordable housing. As you said, Mayor, it is a difficult lift for local governments. It is just such a huge per unit subsidy that is required because of the cost of build housing in our community and the competitive rents that they can garner. So yeah, I will stop there. And Ms. Turner, I think you've got your hand raised.
I'll echo your excitement for Enterprise presentation. This might be my favorite set of manager reports and presentations ever. Great ones. The Ferry Road project, just a question ahead of Tuesday, if we could find out. I'm curious, that's an alarming number, 90,000 per, and I'm wondering if any of that includes just site planning. I know it sounded like the land cost isn't in there, those soft costs, but is that, I mean, this is a large site. I'm wondering if, a large amount is going to site prep. So if anybody has that.
The 90,000 is simply the amount the county plans to contribute. Right. Divided by the number of affordable units, not all the units, just the number of affordable units. That's all the math that was involved there. So yeah, I assume to the extent the county's paying for site prep or whatever.
Yeah, if we're going to start thinking, about our subsidies and in that context you were talking in, I mean, some of it is just massive land moving. So yeah, I mean, I can speak to it more on Tuesday, but I may have some questions around that, just kind of flagging it in case folks need to learn more.
And to our knowledge, there isn't a named developer. So that is to come, to my knowledge.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Well, I wanted to add one more thing to my diatribe here. I noticed in the Stop the Harm report, one of the recommendations under affordable housing is for the city and the county to sort of sync up our programs, because the county has a focus on tax credit financed housing. That's where they want to fund, because they think that, and probably this is true, they leverage the most number of units that way. Just as an example, but obviously we're not synced up entirely in how we're doing this. So I don't know how that would look or feel or how that would change things. But this presents an interesting start to that conversation.
Yeah, and that's a great observation, Mayor. And the great news is the Community and Economic Development team was part of the staff that provided information and has been in direct communication with the Carter Development Group as the audit's been going on. So we anticipate, as part of their presentation on Tuesday, the enterprise at a minimum is going to acknowledge that recommendation coming from the Carter Development Group. And since the enterprise study is not complete, they will be able to include in their final recommendations how the information that they have used could be expanded on a regional level. So we are coordinating those two efforts.
Okay, Dave.
Okay, moving on to item C. Item C is a staff proposed amendment to the UDO that really makes some strategic changes to the city's home occupation standards. And I'm going to share kind of a list of what those are. The amendment, principally, the purpose is to create a limitation on the types of uses that are allowed for a home occupation by ensuring that land uses that are expressly prohibited elsewhere in the city are also prohibited as home occupations. So that, there's some uses that are deemed to be so incompatible with our city. And this is that we have listed those out in the ordinance as things that we just don't allow, but we haven't done that for home occupation. So we just need to get alignment when there are uses that we don't think are appropriate, that we consistently apply that standard. So that is the focal point of the amendment. However, since we have that section of the ordinance open and we're looking at it, the city staff is also, with some recommendations from planning and zoning, is also aligning the city's home occupation standards with really just best practices, and even trying to remove some of the unnecessary regulatory barriers that existed in the current ordinance. And so I won't read these bullets, but over the next 4 bullets on this slide, you can kind of see some of those changes that are being proposed, really just to make the home occupation ordinance a little more user-friendly for people that want to take advantage of that and have home-based businesses. This did go to planning and zoning. They recommended unanimous approval of the use limitation, so that's the first bullet, but also asked staff to do some additional research into some of the other changes you see, which planning staff did. And they'll cover that in a little more detail. But of course, planning staff also recommends approval of this proposed text amendment. Councilwoman Ullman.
I love seeing us remove parking requirements. People can still pursue them, but I like us not inserting that. Can you give me an example of an expressly prohibited use, just for some context of what neighborhood of things that you're talking about?
I'm going to pull up a document, but Brad, if you're able to do that on the fly immediately, I would invite you to give an example if you can.
Could you rephrase that one time? The example of a prohibited use of what, Mandy?
So basically, we're talking about we have expressly prohibited, that's the language, things in other areas, but it doesn't carry over to residential units as a home occupation. What does that mean? Like, you can't have zoo animals?
That gave me time to find the slide, Brad, but I'll let you answer.
Yeah, so I think it's best to answer this by saying that generally speaking, it is very common to have a variety of prohibited uses, things that you would generally not allow. You would not allow sort of heavy industrial uses as just an outright prohibition, generally as a home occupation. things that just are simply completely out of context. So if someone wanted to run, a poultry farm within their home occupation business, that would be something that would be prohibited. The issue we have is actually not trying to expand that, but we've discovered that our language and the way that our ordinance is actually written is simply confusing. And quite frankly, it needs to be corrected because we use a table that shows all the potential uses, and we check boxes to show those things that are allowed. Well, this has really been flipped. Instead of having the things checked, we essentially have checked the things that are prohibited, and the language simply doesn't match. So it appears as if all things are essentially allowed right now, and that was never the intention. So we're simply trying to correct the language to match the intention and prohibit those things that were always intended to be prohibited, such as any items that are completely out of character with a residential neighborhood.
Great, thanks. Just that context. Yep.
Ken, is there any way to elaborate on outdoor storage and what that means?
Typically, that would be a place that has outdoor storage as a principal use of the business. So
Not just homeowners storing things outside.
Like a lumber yard, aggregate material, aggregate materials that are stored in the open. So that would be if that were like, again, you probably wouldn't want to have stone and gravel cells as a home occupation in a neighborhood. And I think that would be a good example.
Okay. Thank you.
Again, these are intense commercial uses that are just not compatible in a residential setting. And really, this is just cleaning up the ordinance to make sure that I think the legislative intent applies. Any other questions on public hearing item C?
Yeah, I guess I started a new question, and maybe it's good for follow-up, but we're just trying to clean up an ordinance, but we anticipating that this is going to be immediately applied? And if so, how many violations are we expecting? Or is it just like we don't expect any concerns to come up? It's just text. And like I said, that could be a follow-up memo.
It may be a follow-up memo, Councilmember Roney, but I think I can answer that right now. We're not aware of any immediate violations that this will cause. This is something that staff has noticed in our reading of the text. They've collaborated with my office, and our suggestion is simply making a minor text fix so that there is no confusion going forward. But this, in my mind, I'm unaware of any violations that would currently exist or result from this.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think part of this, one last item, I think the new planning director and assistant planning director are just making more of an effort, I think, to be proactive where they can. I mean, we're not going to do this when it's a very substantive issue, but if we can identify problems in the UDO that need to be cleaned up, I think they're making an effort to document those and bring those forward when appropriate. And I think this is a good example of that. Okay, moving on, under new business, we have two items. Item A is, and Taylor Floyd referenced this, but that is council's consideration of the fiscal year 2025 fees and charges ordinance. As has been the case in previous years, staff brings forward the fees and charges ordinance for your consideration prior to consideration of the full budget. The Policy, Finance, and HR Committee reviewed these changes for the FY25 fees at their March meeting, and that committee did recommend approval to City Council.
And Ben, as was noted, we will, as part of the budget work session, we'll drill down a little bit so we can save some time at the council meeting. We'll review this again with council.
Thank you, Deborah. And no questions on that. Item B is a resolution to approve the 2024 City Council legislative agenda and direct Brad's office to provide that resolution to members of our local delegation. Policy, Finance, HR Committee also reviewed the proposed legislative agenda at their March meeting. They recommended unanimous approval of that at City Council. And I'll take a second to see, Brad, is there anything you'd like to add on that item in advance of Tuesday?
It's always a very exciting time of year when I get to bring the legislative agenda forward to you. I do just want to mention that there are 10 items that were all presented, as Ben said, to the Policy, Finance, and HR Committee, which was unanimously approved. We have made no changes to the agenda since then, so council will be hearing the exact same list of items. I would encourage any council member who has questions, would like any changes or suggested edits to that, to please let me know if you can before the council meeting so that we can get all of council's input in advance of that and have a streamlined process to provide you a fully comprehensive final legislative proposal by your meeting next week.
Okay, with no other questions, that concludes the review of the council agenda, and I am going to turn it over to Ms. Campbell. As the only council committee we have is Ms. Campbell's committee.
All righty, thank you. Actually, staff support in Ms. Ullman's committee is Environment and Safety. We have a fairly dense agenda. Two of the items are just for information only, and then we have an item related to some grants, requests, approvals, and renewals that we will be asking council for the committee for action. So the first information sharing item is a single-use plastic reduction project update, and our director, Bridget Herring, will be providing an update on where we are with an effort we call Less Plastic Asheville. She will be giving an update in terms of where we are, the efforts related to community outreach and engagement and what has been accomplished, and our next steps in terms of how do we move this effort forward, since essentially we are prohibited to regulate single-use plastic or plastic bags. How do we then still have a positive impact? We will hopefully have a proclamation that will be done in April called the Less Plastic Asheville Month that we will bring to council to acknowledge both community efforts as well as our own internal organizational efforts to reduce single-use, the usage of single-use plastic. The next item would be Electrify Asheville. Buncombe County is a pilot project with them, and we will have the consultants that's been working on this initiative, this joint initiative. And again, that is just for information. And then our last, next to the last item is a number of, as I said earlier, a number of grants. We normally don't bring these to committees, but we started a couple of years ago regarding some of the public safety type grants to bring these to, at the time, it was the Public Safety Committee and now Environment and Public Safety. So there are a number of them. The Justice Assistance Grant, the Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant, Law Enforcement Mental Health and Wellness Grant, the HIPGUT Grant, and those will be requested in terms of a vote to move forward to full council for action. And then there's one other, which is a Geosystems contract renewal. And then the last item is just for information that we are applying for the Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant. That will be all of the items for the Environment and Safety Committee. Meet on March 26th at 11 o'clock, I believe. Dan, I can turn it over to you unless there are any questions.
Okay, seeing no questions, 8-week agenda. I want to generally want to draw your attention over that we have several additional budget work sessions, and I'll cover this shortly. Also, you'll see on the 8-week agenda a number of items related to the establishment of the Business Improvement District, or BID, Both of those topics have multiple agenda items scheduled through the end of the fiscal year. So you're going to see a lot more of both of those generally. A little more, drilling down a little more specifically, on April 23rd, council is scheduled to hear the continued public hearings for cottage development standards and flag lots. Those were two items that were initiated through a resident text amendment process. Staff will also be presenting amendments to the UDO that are related to both those items, but are really influenced or take into consideration the recommendations from the missing middle study. So you'll have information presented by the applicant for those two items, as well as information presented by the staff. And that is currently scheduled for April 23rd, as that was the date set at the last council continuance. The other item I want to note is on April 9th, you have a public hearing scheduled for a proposed conditional zoning off New Hall Creek Road. That did go to Planning and Zoning Commission last night. Had over 300 people attend that meeting. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval with conditions on a 4-3 vote. So right now that is scheduled to be at council on April 9th for your consideration. Any other questions on the 8-week agenda or anything you'd like to highlight or discuss?
My only question is, when we do the Hawk Creek development, we might consider not doing it at City Hall, just because it was, anyway, it was a little bit of a tricky situation last night. They had the banquet room set up with the table in the center. And so it wasn't, the chairs weren't set out to allow for maximum occupancy. So we actually worked out a situation where we took a break and they brought in a whole bunch of other chairs to get everyone off the floor and from standing up. So I don't know that we'll see that many people come out at council, but I bet we will see something close to that. So anyway, maybe the way we used to set up the banquet room during COVID, where we're up against the back wall and it allows for maximum seating. I know Maggie Burleson's head is probably spinning right now. Oh, your hand's already up. But anyway, I mean, it just seemed like we might want to do that. And then also, if we want to check that night, if that there's not a concert at the same time. Bob Dylan was playing last night, but so just because of the whole parking can become pretty tricky with that many people trying to go to the Civic Center. Just some thoughts about how to manage that one.
Mayor, I've already checked with the Civic Center and it is available. They will also have the pre-banquet room set up with a screen. And they also have the press room that they can live stream if we need more.
Overflow.
More than
Yeah,
that.
oh yeah, that was the other thing. They didn't have chairs set up in the overflow and they didn't have the screen available in the overflow. They were using it in another part of the building because they weren't anticipating the need for that. So, and we'll probably need some more staff for traffic control to help people understand where to sit and how they can see a screen. It was no traffic control last night. So it was a little tricky.
I agree. And I think being able to announce that sooner rather than later would be great. When we had the noise ordinance meeting in that same building, at least in the overflow room, folks were pointed in the same direction and had more information and we were prepared. And I think we should be prepared again. So thank you.
Another thought is, listening to the conversation last night, there was a request to P&Z for P&Z to postpone the conversation as there's, a concerted community organizing effort that's been in negotiations and conversations with the developers. So I just want to flag that I wouldn't be surprised if that request comes to us as well as we're looking at what our spring schedule is. There's a lot happening on this spring in general, and I know that staff is doing a good job balancing how many conversations we can even have capacity for at different council meetings. So just want to flag that might come up again. And I don't know if there would even be latitude, but just want to flag so staff can start thinking that through.
Brad, would you like to lecture us about the statutory requirement to hear it within a certain number of days unless the applicant asks for a continuance?
That would be fantastic.
Go.
I think I can give you the short answer and say that there are some limitations on how much we can unilaterally push this out if the applicant is not amenable to that. So some of this will be dependent upon the applicant's insistence or lack thereof of wanting to move it forward. As an applicant, they have the right to be heard within a certain amount of time for this kind of a subject matter. So we as city staff certainly are in communication with the applicant, and we can see whether or not there is an interest in that if council is open to that possibility or interested in it, but we will need the applicant to give us their okay. If they choose to move it forward, then I think it would be council's obligation to hear it.
Yeah, I heard that request too. And I'm just imagining if we have an overflow room in the Civic Center with 100 or more people ready to give comment during the public hearing, and then we hear that there's an agreement to continue it to the following meeting, and we don't have that hearing, the process will be the problem, not the subject matter. And I would love to get in front of the subject matter, not the process. So if there's a way to better understand if we're going to be considering a delay, then we could be scheduling this for the second weekend or the second meeting of April would be great.
So yeah, so make sure, I'm sure staff will be talking to the applicant, but really kind of drilling down on that issue, whether they plan to request a continue. It's not a good idea to do it at last minute with this kind of logistics involved. That's my new favorite word. Also, by the way, Sam, new planner Sam, did awesome job last night. Very, very good job. Not that we have favorite planners, but he did an excellent presentation.
Planning staff is listening. So one, I think they understand what council's looking for, and two, appreciate the feedback on Sam. If there are no other questions, on the 8-week agenda, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Campbell to kind of kick off our other issues and update section. So thank you, and Ms. Campbell.
One thing that might be helpful for a follow-up. I was in the meeting for at least 4 hours yesterday, and I know that we have 6 conditions that are going to come forward from the Planning and Zoning Commission. What I heard afterwards is that, are those conditions legal? And I know, Brad, you're in the room. I'm starting to piece together multiple parts. There were recommendations made during public comment that there might be a preservation of trees in the interior of the project. There's already a consideration that might be able to happen. So there's still negotiations happening. I assume that we're doing this, but a running document of like which parts we are or aren't able to consider would be so helpful.
Correct.
For example, 711.3 and 719 around tree canopy preservation would have to be minimums, right? So there are some moving parts about heritage trees and what we could and couldn't ask. And I think those questions will come up again, and we should be ready to answer them.
Okay. Any other comments before we move on to the next portion of the agenda? All right, our first item is the mountain housing opportunities. This item, generally speaking, we said we would do it under the other issues and updates. It is your item G on your agenda under the consent. And we have Dennis Newburn and Nikki Reed who are going to cover this item. I just want to say first and foremost how again lucky we are. You talked about planning staff and how they presented, the proficiency of how they presented, but I also want to lift up both Dennis and Nikki in terms of this particular item, because this could have been extremely detrimental for us in terms of future CDBG dollars and the number. And I won't spoil it for them in terms of their presentation, but I just wanted both council and the community to understand and acknowledge what good staff we have And we came to a really, really good resolution on a particular issue that, again, could have been detrimental to us. And so, again, Nikki or Dennis, I'm not sure who to give it to.
Thank you very much, City Manager. Mayor, council members, good morning. I'm Dennis Newbern, and the purpose of our discussion is to talk about MHO, but also as a prelude to the resolution that you have before you authorizing the extension of a contract with Training and Development Associates, who played a very instrumental role in helping us to get to where we are with respect to the issue. For those of you that were not around perhaps back in January 22, the mayor and the city manager received a letter from the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. And that letter came about as a result of an on-site monitoring visit that HUD conducted for the express purpose of looking at our Home Investments Partnership Program. Home is a sister program to the Community Development Block Grant Program, but they come from the same family. With respect to the actual monitoring visit, there were 5 findings that were identified by HUD. And as the city manager alluded to, part of those findings involved one situation where there was the responsibility of payback that HUD had imposed on the city. A consultant was hired by the city to take a deep dive on our behalf to look at the issues that HUD had cited with respect to the monitoring visit, and to also provide guidance with respect to how to resolve the issue. Fast forward to November of last year, whereupon I briefed the mayor and the city manager of our intent at that time to basically suspend operations with MHO pending resolution of the issues that HUD had identified. And it's important to note that it was HUD that has identified the issues. Typically, we contract with organizations to undertake activities that we are not able to do. The down payment assistance program at that time, several years ago, was in fact one of those. When we contract with organizations, we still have a statutory and a fiduciary responsibility to make certain that all of the rules and regulations that have been imposed by the grantor, in this case HUD, are followed. Sometimes that causes pain within nonprofit organizations that we deal with. But again, my responsibility is to report to you information that strongly suggests the proper way to go with respect to how to manage HUD funds. And for ultimately to put the council and the city in a situation whereby they're taking the best advice available. I'm very happy to say that there was a complete turnaround on the part of HUD. And there were many people involved in the development of that turnaround. And that turnaround has basically led to announcing today that what HUD had recommended 2 years ago, we have been authorized to take an entirely different path. And that path would in fact allow us to continue the down payment assistance program. And moreover, to be in a situation whereby that we are not in jeopardy of having other funding sources canceled from HUD that are very vital to the outcome of providing services to our low and moderate income community. Having said that, I'm briefing you today simply for the fact that one of the things that's required is that we're not done yet. The use of technical assistance, and in particular of the organization for the resolution that you have before you, we still require their work. We have a contract with them, and the contract for the additional amount of money that we're anticipating we'll spend will exceed the required or the statutory limit with respect to how far we can go with the city manager's approval on awarding contracts. So therefore, we're asking for permission to extend the contract and also to provide an additional $17,000 to complete the work that they're doing on our behalf, so that we can go ahead and wrap this issue up with respect to the down payment assistance program, and in fact offer this important and vital service to the community.
Yay! This is good news. This is a long time coming, so I'm really glad to hear. And I got briefed a little bit at a previous meeting. So one follow-up question I do have is, I just need a little history. I don't think it's coming to this Tuesday's meeting, but in the coming weeks when these proposals come to us, And one of the applications and potential awardees is this applicant around down payment assistance. I just need to know if historically there is any policy on record of council writing policy or language around shared appreciation. I'm getting mixed historical reports. It's before my time, so I just don't know. And if we need to change anything to amend moving forward. But this is great news. I'm glad that we are able to sync up with this partner again and also use this outside source to kind of ratify what needs to be done so it's done smoothly, properly forward, because it is such a tool for the community. We haven't been able to activate it in some time.
You're absolutely right. In my regular travels throughout the city, there is a major cry for assistance to help with home ownership. It is something that obviously helps people. It helps the community generate more tax dollars. And it's basically the idea of everyone having the opportunity to own a home is a very good thing. Shared appreciation is an entirely different, long discussion. Be very happy to have it with you today. You're scheduled to go to 1 o'clock. I can talk to 1 o'clock about that if you want to do that. We can talk later.
Yeah,
We can do
mostly if it's
something
not
to
clear if
follow up.
we have a policy already adopted about this or a position that a future or past council took. That's all.
So 2 thoughts on that. From a HUD perspective, you do have a policy and you basically ratify that policy every year when we submit to you for your consideration our annual action plan, which covers how we're going to spend CDBG and home funds. We will be doing that again in hopefully May or June. And prior to that, you'll have the opportunity to be aware of, we're going to make a change to it and what that consists of.
Antoinette?
Yes, ma'am.
We received a pretty extensive email from the executive director. Do you want to address any of the points shared in that email?
I do not. And I say that with all due respect. The issue here, first and foremost, was the resolution of the concern that HUD had with the city of Asheville. And, with respect to how that process has gone, it started long before I came to the city. It's been a very painful process for the nonprofit organization as well as for the city. There have been a lot of hurt feelings, both sides. Most importantly, the community has been denied a very, very important service, as we've talked about before. The very idea that problem has been resolved and we are in a position now to be able to offer that service with the current organization or with somebody else. The most important thing is that we're able to offer the service, and in fact, the funding source is in total concurrence with how we're proceeding forward. And I get emails all the time, good or bad or indifferent. That's part of our life. I respect that, but I'm very pleased with the decision that HUD has made with respect to how we're going to be able to go forward. And I'm very happy to report that to all of you today.
HCD did discuss this if anybody's curious and wants to go back and watch our last meeting.
All right, any additional questions or comments? If not, again, thank you, Dennis and Nikki, for your efforts and your work on this important community resource. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All righty. I think, Ben, you have the next item regarding Business Improvement District for downtown Asheville.
I do. Thank you, Deborah. This is the next and the last item on our agenda today. I am going to share a few slides. These are very text-heavy slides. I'm sorry, I had a technical glitch there. The Business Improvement District, I think most council members are aware of that at this point, and that is an effort that's outlined in North Carolina general statutes. So there's some very specific ways in which a bid can come to be. And what I want to do today is just give a little bit of background information on the bid. I want to provide a timeline of what that will look like for the remainder of the fiscal year, then I want to share some information about it. The reason I'm doing this today is on your agenda on Tuesday, the Chamber of Commerce created a bid steering committee. And again, bid means Business Improvement District, and they will be before you Tuesday to provide a presentation. So there's no vote or anything that council needs to do on Tuesday, but you will get an update from the chamber and their bid steering committee members kind of about how they've arrived at the creation of a bid and kind of what their next steps will be and what they hope to accomplish with that. So I'm just giving a little bit of background as we get to Tuesday. A bid is, and this is language from the statutes, a bid is a service district defined by ordinance that is in need of one or more defined services, facilities, or functions to a demonstrably greater extent than the remainder of the city. So that's important wording. So what the bid does, it allows a group or an area, a district within the city to enhance the services that the city already provides. So the city provides a set of baseline services. Bids are a mechanism by which a geographical area can enhance those services, and they do that by levying a tax. So they are, in essence, taxing themselves to enhance the city's baseline services. We do not have a bid established in Asheville. There are many bids, not only in North Carolina, but throughout the country. And I think the bid steering committee will talk about that a little bit. The next question is, well, who is leading the bid process? And I think this is really important. The Asheville Chamber of Commerce is doing that, and they were doing that in close coordination with the Asheville Downtown Association, and they're working directly with downtown stakeholders to address their concerns, those stakeholder concerns around services, safety, and cleanliness. So again, this is really a community-driven, chamber-led request that's coming to the City Council. One of the things that has to be done is there has to be the preparation of an operational plan or report that's required by general statutes. The chamber has done that. I'll share a link in a minute. That is available, and that will be something you'll consider as the City Council. So the last question is, what is the city's role in the development of a bid? In this instance, is kind of two things I want to cover. First is city staff. We did provide the bid steering committee a current services document for the CBD. So this document outlines the base city services that the city is currently providing in the downtown area. That is what the bid would build off of. Because again, they have to enhance those services and show that there's a demonstrably greater extent needed in the downtown than other areas of the city. Your role as City Council is you will cause the report to be prepared, which has been done, and you'll hold a public hearing before adopting any ordinance that defines and levies a property tax for the new services proposed in the district. And I'm going to show a schedule for that, so you get a feel for the steps that council actually has. You're going to see this several times over the next few months. So on the next slide, you can see what the bid process looks like. It actually starts today. So you are getting the first update on the day it starts. The Chamber of Commerce has submitted their bid operational plan to the clerk's office. Maggie literally has that printed out on her desk. That's a requirement of the statute. So that plan is here and available for inspection by anybody. We, of course, have that available on the website, or the chamber does, and I'll share that link in a minute. The next step, and as part of that, the clerk's office is preparing notices. So we have to provide mailed notice to affected property owners, as well as we have to provide notice in a newspaper. So that notice work is happening. All that happens in advance of the public hearing that you'll hold. Tomorrow, the bid steering committee is going to provide a presentation to the downtown commission. So that'll be the first opportunity for the city, or at least the city advisory board, to kind of see that presentation. The public notice I just referenced, that gets mailed to all property owners on March 25th at the latest. Again, the clerk's office is preparing that right now. That goes to every property owner in the district. On Tuesday, as I mentioned, the bid steering committee will be at your meeting, at City Council meeting. They will provide a presentation to you, City Council. That's an information presentation. The next step that you'll see, and this is what the notice is for, on April 23rd, you will hold your public hearing to consider the operational plan or report, as well as the establishment of the bid for the downtown area. Following the public hearing, because there may be property owners that have concerns with the bid, following the public hearing, the chamber will finalize the bid boundary, which is necessary to allow the tax office to levy any kind of property tax and to understand, you know, what the budget or what the resources could be for that bid. Then council, you have 2 ordinance readings. So you're going to have to vote on the bid twice in order for it to be effective. The first will be on May 14th. That's your first ordinance reading of the bid. The second, if it gets to the second reading, that will be June 11th, and that will be your second reading of the bid. Just as kind of so everybody is aware, the last possible date for passage of the bid for the next fiscal year will be June 25th of this year. So if the bid passes both readings of council, it will then become effective on July 1st, 24th. And once that occurs, really at that point, the tax office will begin taking the steps to levy the property tax and collect it. Also, then the city will go through the process of really going through an access RFP process to establish a bid operator for that district. I'm going to pause here. Any questions on what a bid is or what the timeline is proposing to do?
I had one question. So it sounds like as part of the first reading and second reading, the taxing amount is included in that. So it'll 9 cents or whatever it is. What is the I know there was some discussion around the timing of the council appointing the initial bid board. What did you guys decide about how that should be timed relative to, you know, if a bid is created?
Brad, I'm going to ask you to talk about the process for the board appointment, if that's okay.
Absolutely. So, Mayor, this is really 2 separate processes. The approval of a bid is specifically linked to the July 1st date where any new taxes must start. So a bid must be approved fully prior to that July 1st date. Now, obviously, because this is a property tax, essentially, those tax bills don't end up going out until September of this year, and you would not actually generally see the income coming in until January of the following year. So there's a period of time following the approval and the actual implementation of any bid that council approved before the process would actually be funded in a way that could be implemented through the delivery of services. So our plan, I believe at this point, would be to go through the process of letting council consider the approval of the bid, and then thereafter we could start the secondary process, if so approved, to issue the RFP and have council select a firm to run the actual bid process. And really, so long as that would be done before the start of the new year, the new calendar year, you would have plenty of time because the funding generally won't be coming in for them anyway until that point.
Thanks.
And Brad, if I can add to that, Mayor, at your presentation on Tuesday, I believe the Chamber Bid Steering Committee does plan to discuss governance and conceptually what the makeup of the bid board could be. So that is items I believe they will discuss on Tuesday. Councilwoman Kilgore.
Okay, yes, I just wanted to ask a question. Is this the best way that or the most common way that bids are supported in the communities is through a tax levy, or are there other ways that they're funded?
I'm going to defer. I mean, my from my knowledge, they're typically funded through a tax levy. I'm not aware if there are other means or not, and Brad may be able to answer that.
Yeah, I believe, Vice Mayor, I can probably answer that. So a bid, has been mentioned earlier, is completely statutorily defined very specifically, and the only methodology that it's funded is through the property tax levy.
Thank you.
I've just wanted to share with council, I don't know if anybody else is having a concern about the speed of this, because we usually process things with more committees and community input. But on the bright side of that is that I reached out to the chamber and met with them and expressed, what is the outreach? Who is being contacted? What kind of information are we going to get from, say, smaller businesses, biggest businesses, or who's supporting what? And mentioned that, when we were reviewing the Patton Avenue Complete Streets, multipath, whatever we're calling it, there were some businesses along that road that were so upset and they hadn't been informed. So I specifically asked, had they been approached? Had this been discussed with them? And they said a mix of some had and some hadn't, and they would go out and make sure they did. And I say this to share that if there's if you're worried about some people not being a part of this process or not in the loop, this is our time to let the chamber know that we're concerned about this group or this area and the outreach or whatever it is, because I do see them taking action right away to remedy that. And I would hate for us to push this timeline right to the end and then be like, wait, nobody from so-and-so or we didn't hear from happened. So this is our moment as councilwoman to express, this is who we want to make sure we've heard from. So just sharing that. I had a good conversation with them, and I am a little stressed about this timeline, but I understand why it needs to happen at this rate. And I appreciate this being it almost seems like sped up. I didn't know it was coming Tuesday until just a few days ago. So maybe we're trying to spread out the input.
And so we concur, and we have been, and Ben Woody has been our major point of contact for the city, have been encouraging them to do as much outreach as possible, and actually made them aware that this would be a concern of council, that you all will be asking them questions. Who have you reached out to, or who have you not? So we're definitely encouraging them to do that.
Do we want
Maggie
to? I'm sorry.
Maggie just put in the chat that 1,700 mailings are going out tomorrow to all property owners in the bid. Of course, that's the landowner, because that's who has to pay the tax. But Maggie, you're talking about from the city as required by the statute as part of the process. Yeah, Sage, I think part of the issue here is that bids are a funny animal in that they originate outside of City Hall, but they require City Hall to approve them. So, and I think staff's been a little bit like, hey, we're not going to run around and run this all through subcommittees because this isn't our ask, but we are required to facilitate it. So it doesn't seem rushed to me, because I know they've been out there in the community talking to folks for months and months and months, when it finally does hit our desk, it is then it hits on this timeline that you have to follow through, step by step.
Correct. And I'm with you. I just wonder, so I saw that Downtown Commission is the really only committee, and I'm that liaison, and it's tomorrow morning, that meeting, if anybody's interested. But are there other committees we would like to suggest they go to, or we just kind of keep it limited for?
I don't think staff wants, I'm seeing Deborah shake her head. I don't think staff wants to do that again, because it's not a city initiative.
I get that.
I get the problem, because we got to vote on it and we have to put the tax in place.
I get that. I just feel like it's also our role to engage our community members that may be impacted, whether or not it's our initiative or not. So just putting it out there if anybody else is concerned.
Sage, are there any committees that come to mind or anything? Because I like that you're asking the question, because this is the right time for it. And so it has me thinking, but just curious if you have any in mind in particular.
I don't know. And I'm happy to think about that today. Just, one of the things that came to mind was the riverfront, just because they opted that there wasn't enough support down there. But maybe they can lean in. I'm not sure. It just didn't seem like a lot of our initiated involvement or opportunity to speak and share opinions. And I get that the chamber has been doing this a long time. And just, and what I think our citizens will see is that it comes to us really quickly and we didn't do anything. And it's not that I'm saying it's our responsibility to do anything, but we can also host conversations. We can also offer opportunity for input.
So let me ask you a question, Sage. You mentioned Riverfront Committee, but the properties on the river wouldn't be paying this.
I know. They were a prospective bid location and didn't. And, I'm talking about engagement in general. I'm not suggesting we go to the riverfront.
Okay.
I'll think more thoroughly about if I have a suggestion on committee. I just wanted to hear from y'all if you have the same concern and if there were other bodies we should try and get this in front of before it comes right to us. but maybe I'm just the only one concerned.
Well, I think, again, staff is equally as concerned as council. And we want to, again, make sure that the chamber is reaching out to property owners. And as the mayor has said, they have been doing a lot. There's a steering committee of property owners, of affected property owners, that is kind of spearheading this thing. So it really is a bottom up kind of a process. And I know that sometimes we get a little uncomfortable with those things when essentially we're not kind of managing them to dot all the I's and cross the T's. But I think that they are doing, the chamber is doing a yeoman's job in terms of the outreach to date, but we will continue to encourage them to do more. Ms. Roney?
Yes, thank you. I hear and share some of the same concerns around the table. There are a couple things that are coming up as I've been to some of the stakeholder meetings, two of the most recent ones. I've talked with some folks from the chamber. I'm sure that people are listening to this conversation now. So I know that this is an opportunity to partner, but one of the concerns I hear is, are we ready to partner? So bids are meant to provide services above and beyond. And the two biggest concerns that we were hearing are around safety and hospitality and cleanliness. And so when I'm getting questions from business owners and operators and even workers, are you able to provide the base level services that a city should be expected to provide on sanitation and public works and paying first responders? And I have to be honest that the answer is no. We've struggled to get to living wages for entry level staff positions in public works and sanitation and to pay our first responders. So having a new property tax that doesn't help to meet those base level needs, it almost does feel like, are we being honest about our ability and readiness to partner? There are some other concerns that I'm hearing, but a big one is that we are really focused on not wanting this, I guess, to explode at the last minute. And so we're trying to make sure that there's a good open air and conversation happening. And I hear a lot of talk in the business community, but this is going to impact residents and renters. And so where does that burden of responsibility fall for the people who live downtown that are going to be impacted by this? Because those notices are going out to the property owners, I would expect us to hear conversations from our neighborhood groups like downtown residents. So there's still that residential part that's layered in that I'm like, okay, we should be expecting to hear from residents and we haven't yet. And maybe it's because that outreach hasn't been done.
Or they know that there's a public hearing coming up. I mean, you will have a public hearing. So that will be the opportunity to hear from the broader community.
Chime in too, just relationship wise, I'm hearing and have been for some time, even when I was campaigning, from downtown residents who have an interest in this. So I think that what I'm hearing is kind of like our informal work as councilwomen, right? As we're in relationship with people and what's a structured process. So I think that's fair, but just want to share that I'm hearing support from many residents who are real connectors in the downtown Durham community. So for what that's worth.
I am as well, residents in particular.
And if I could just add a couple of this. Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, in talking with staff about just the timeline, logistics of this, any favorite word, we did have the option to have the public hearing and then the first reading, the first vote at the same meeting. But I thought, given that it hasn't been to us yet, that we would do the public hearing and then vote at the next meeting. And then we have the second reading, of course, at the next meeting. So it's sort of stretched over 3 meetings, just so you're aware that there's kind of time to get some reflections from that public hearing and see if any adjustments need to be made.
Really thoughtful, Mayor. I think especially in the context of this discussion of this is a partner-led initiative, but we're ultimate decision makers. I think that rhythm really uses kind of our time for public input in a thoughtful, staggered way. And every time we open a conversation, then the media listens, and then they open conversations, and the media kind of instigates the big questions, and then it can kind of churn through. So I think that's a elegant approach.
Antoinette?
And also, it would be really helpful because I received a copy of the map, but it's never blown up enough and I can't see the streets. So I've gotten concerns from people in East End to see if that Hildebrand portion is included. That's St. James, that street. I need to know that.
Well, see, and you bring up a good point. Like, I want to know that East End has been communicated with. And, perhaps I'm just saying this because we think that the chamber's listening right now. So when you come to us on Tuesday, I want to know if the East End has been communicated with. I want to see a clearer map, to Antoinette's point. So I don't want to use this agenda briefing that way, but I feel like that's kind of what's happening by default.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that I know Kit was working on getting in contact. I just have not heard what those conversations were. So I know they're interested in reaching out. I just don't know. And again, I'm trying to look at the map now and I can't tell what's what and what's what.
We'll make sure we get that clarified for you, Ben.
We'll find the mute button. So real quickly, and just want a couple of things. The chamber is listening. So I know they are, and of course they will be prepared to address some of these questions and concerns on Tuesday. They'll have to work that into their 10 minutes, but I'm sure they will. A couple of things. One is, the city is sending out a statutory required mailing notice. The chamber is separately doing their own notices through mailing, so they are doing that. Good question on the downtown residents. I know the chamber met with Darn, at least leadership of Darn, on Monday of this week. So they've already had direct meetings with the Downtown Association of Residential Neighbors is what I think Darn stands for. I also know that they have, similar to what Antoinette said, they are aware of needing to make some contacts to neighborhoods outside of the boundaries. And I think they were planning to do that. Hopefully they'll address that on Tuesday. And the last thing I want to say is, I do think the chamber they've been a good partner, and I think if they understand things that need to be done, I believe they will try to do that. So I just want to clarify that. In my last slide, and I think this is important, there are a number of documents that have been made available to the community. I have these linked in this slide, so hopefully the city maybe we can post this small slide deck to make sure if somebody comes to our page, they can get access to these links. But really, if you go to downtownashevillebid.com, you're able to access not only council, but the public, all these documents. That includes their feasibility report, the operational plan that they'll present to council, some bid quick facts, as well as the city's current CBD services. Those are pretty detailed and exhaustive documents. I know the maps included in the operational plan. There's a standalone map on that website. So we definitely have time to access this information and learn more about the proposal. And I also think the chamber is prepared to try to make some of these community connections as long as we make them aware of that. So I just wanted to share that. And that really concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Mayor, unless there are any additional issues, concerns, that was our last agenda item. And we can stand adjourned if you all don't have any further questions.
Can I ask one last question? I'm sorry. I was
Sure.
going to just email Brad, but I'm going to say it since we have a minute. Brad, I just am unclear on something I'm learning about the bid process and how the board structure might be organized. And it's a tier of taxpayers and ranges is what I'm understanding will be proposed. If you're in this property value zone, you have a role or something. Anyways, I would like to know if there are other ways that can be sorted, or if this is part of this bid process in the state of North Carolina where it has to be a tier of taxpayers and their values. Not today, but maybe as a follow-up item.
I can probably answer that pretty quickly, Councilmember Turner. So the way that the bid is structured, and there's a lot of confusion about this particular topic. I think that the chamber has tried to answer this question as best they can, but I'm glad you asked it for the public's awareness. We are essentially under the same restraints with a bid tax as we are with your typical ad valorem tax, which means we get to assign one rate. and that rate applies to everyone. We are completely lacking authority to do any sort of tiered system or exemptions. Only the state legislature can create tax exemptions, and that includes the bid, which means that council will have the authority to set the total bid tax percentage that will apply exactly to everyone. Any sort of exemptions that may exist for someone are those that are provided by the state legislature. We can't create a tiered system at all, so everyone would essentially be paying the same tax within the bid geographic.
I think my question is more
She's asked about the board.
how the board is established. If there are any parameters that the state process or whatever regulations must say it is set up, or if that is more of a operational thing that can be changed, or in our case, reviewed and approved or not approved based on it.
So the statutes allow us to do this internally or to contract out with an external third-party entity to, quote, manage the bid. Now, council by statute must retain final authority over the funding, i.e. the funds don't go to the bid first, to the bid committee or bid governing board. They always come to the city the same way that all taxes come to the city. And then as part of your council budgeting process, you would funnel those particular set of funds into this bid committee for spending, depending upon what kind of service was actually being provided. So they have
that third
authority to
party would
manage.
define how their board members are created, enrolled, appointed, et cetera. And
That's
we would have
exactly-
no say in that whatsoever.
Well, to the degree that you have the ability to contract with a particular firm, we could have some degree of control over how that firm was structured. That could all be designed as part of our bid procurement. So we could say that this is generally what we were looking at, but as is the case with most of our contractual procurements, we don't intermingle about their governing structure.
But I thought you just said that we appoint the initial board. So that's a little confusing.
We will select the third-party entity that would manage it. If that is a board that's an entity in and of themselves, if an entity sets up their own board, a lot of that's outside of our purview, but we can contract with a third-party entity to manage the bid. That's our option.
So in so
So-
much of my approval and interest in this bid is in who manages it. So am I hearing that it might become a runaway thing? Like we have a interested fund, we help establish it and appoint some board members, but it may become its own thing from there on? Morph into something like one of my concerns, I'll just vocalize it, is that it's heavily run by tourism or hospitality. And when we look at it at a property tax level, it sounds like some of these bigger properties, say hotels, will have seats because of that. And I know this is all forming, none of this is defined. So I'm just trying to flush it out. But I want to make sure that we avoid it being heavily hospitality or tourism related simply because there's already a tourism authority. But I'm not clear if I'll be able to do that. Like if we have a say in that setup just once or if it can morph. Maybe this is an offline conversation.
And I think it is definitely something that you all, as Ben has said, the chamber is listening. I'm hoping that as they prepare their presentation, that they will be responding to some of the issues and concerns that you all have raised at this meeting. If not, we will make certain that they touch on some of these things if they have left the meeting or are no longer engaged with us. Maggie, I'm sorry, I went before you. I apologize.
I just have lots of questions, and we're going to talk about it with the chamber on Tuesday. So I might just hold back, but I guess I had a different understanding of the appointment process and the ongoing appointment process. And so that's where I want to go back into the feasibility study, because I had been under the impression that appointments would come through city council, not just RFP selection of the vendor to manage the system. So I guess I'm turned around from conversations I've had. So I'm look forward to reading all the stuff that was just posted on their website and kind of hearing from the chamber as well.
That was the opposite of my understanding and one of the biggest concerns. I made an effort because I knew we were trying to run a lot through our meeting today to keep it short and keep it on our side. But the biggest concerns I'm hearing are lack of accountability for a yet another body that oversees public tax dollars without public accountability, like being able to elect the board, not having the base level services prepared to partner, and who is served by this. In addition, I'm hearing a lot of concerns from property owners and businesses that support a bid fundamentally as a general rule, but then ask, you have to promise not to raise property taxes for 10 years. And I was like, first of all, I'm never going to honestly be able to tell you that's the case. But also, we're talking about a bond and the county tax reval. Like, it's got to be a serious concern on our local small business economy that we're talking about overlapping property tax increases at the same time. So we have a lot of questions. Some of those fall on us, and some of those are going to fall on the public to bring to the chamber. But I think we have opportunity as leaders to make space for that to happen. And so I appreciate the extended timeline that's been set up.
Thank you. We'll work with the chamber. We'll try to get as many of these issues and concerns addressed as part of their presentation, but obviously you all will have the opportunity to have a more extended conversation with them after their 10-minute presentation.
Thank you, everyone. Sorry to delay us.
No problem.
Thanks. Okay.
Sandra,
Bye, everybody.
Sandra, did you? Okay. All right. Bye-bye. Hope you feel better, Mayor.